Welcome, everyone, to another installment of the Millennial podcast. I am your host, Mitchell Millennial. And in today's video, we are going to be covering a couple of things I recently talked about on my channel this week, as well as some products currently on the market. Before we get into that, I'd like to go ahead and thank everyone that uses the affiliate links. As always, without your support, we couldn't keep the channel or the podcast going. Also, if you guys want to talk to me on Telegram, go ahead and hit the link in the description down below and jump in my Telegram community. Okay, enough of that. First, I wanted to talk about these 48 megapixel cell phone cameras, specifically the ones coming out from Xiaomi in the Redmi Note 7 and the Redmi Note 7 Pro, as well as the one in the Xiaomi Mi 8. And the reason I wanted to the reason why I wanted to talk about that in today's video is because I did a video talking about whether or not a Mi 9 could replace my A6500 as just like a kind of point and shoot, small mobile vacation recording memory device type of thing. And I got some really interesting responses from it. And to start kind of talking about that video, I made that video for people specifically who have little to no interest in photography, in regards to people that necessarily don't have experience with photography. Coffee break. And people who just wanted to capture memories on a device that would be small and portable. What could fulfill that better? What could allow you to be creative with it? An A6500 or a Mi 9. I kind of ended the video without necessarily a final verdict, but hinting that I could be just as happy and just as satisfied using a cell phone as I could be using a dedicated camera. And at the heart of what I'm getting at with a video like that, and kind of what I'm getting at overall, the point that I was trying to make, is that when you are traveling, when you're on vacation, if you are trying to do photos or kind of document a trip or an experience that you have, the A6500 isn't going to make up for its bulkiness, extra sizeness of it, having to take photos off of an SD card. It's not going to make up for that in performance for most people if you're shooting JPEGs. Now, I know people are going to talk about RAW and different lenses. Guys, I have a Pelican case with $3,000 of prime lenses in it for my A6500. And the reason I've chosen prime lenses is because they are at the top of the optical quality for the APS-C Sony E-mount. So I know a thing or two about cameras. I know a thing or two about lenses. I've been a photographer since I was like 13, 14 years old. And I've been shooting Nikon for most of my life, recently switched to Sony, yada, yada, yada. I don't need to tell you what my credentials are. But if you want to see my photography, go check out my website, mitchellmillennial.com. Hit the photo section, obviously. And you guys can take a look at some of the photos I've made over the course of my life. And what I wanted to really express in the video regarding the Mi 9 replacing my A6500 is that although the quality is obviously not going to be the same, what device is better at capturing moments, memories, things that you would want to share with people? And on social media, having the best camera doesn't really make a difference, to be completely fair. Most people are looking at screens that are HD resolution or less. Maybe they're looking at them on a 2K display or a higher than full HD display. A display which, by the way, is 5 inches in size, 6 inches in some cases. Or on a laptop, which, unless you have a newer MacBook Pro or an XPS 15 like I have, you're probably capped at around 1080p or 2.7K or 2.5K, I guess, in regards to resolution. So having a bunch of having a really nice camera for social media purposes, especially when the stuff is getting compressed, it doesn't make a fucking difference. It doesn't make a difference at all. So quality, not the most important thing when doing that. And so I was really, really happy with the Mi 9. I was really happy with how it performed in low light and good light. I was really happy in the dynamic range, the colors I got from it. I was really, really happy with having the 3 focal lengths, which to me is a big game changer. And I think maybe I should briefly touch on why the 3 focal lengths to me are so important. And I will give you an analogy that comes to mind. When you are shooting on a full frame professional camera, there's usually 3 zoom lenses that 80% of pros have, right? And that's a 16 to 35 or a 14 to 24 if you're a Nikon shooter. Something that's ultra wide, you'll have a 24 to 70 f2.8, which is a kind of normal, like wide angle, but not ultra wide angle to short telephoto lens. And then you'll have a 70 to 200 2.8, which would be a telephoto lens. And so having something on the Mi 9, which is equivalent, I think it's equivalent to a 17 millimeter on the wide end, 35 millimeter equivalent, a 20 or 22 millimeter for the 48 megapixel main shooter, and I think it's a 50 millimeter for the telephoto lens. Having those different options is like wide, semi-normal-ish with a crop, normal-ish to telephoto lens. So being able to compose photos that utilize that, it removes the limitations that you would normally have without photo stitching or panoramas and stuff like that. So to me, it gives me now a tool that has kind of the same set of field of view that I would have from a 35 millimeter camera or just a normal interchangeable lens camera. And so that's why, at least to me, the 3 camera thing is such a game changer. My last device, which was the Xiaomi Mi A2, that had a higher megapixel camera. My Mi A1 had the telephoto camera, and that was nice, but it's not on the same level of the Mi 9. And that's going to go ahead and kind of dovetail into talking about why these 48 megapixel cell phone cameras are a scam. Coffee break again. So 48 megapixel cameras, kind of a scam. Kind of definitely a scam if we look at the megapixel count as a tool or a feature that is used to sell devices. Because on the box of the Redmi Note 7 Pro, one of the things that's prominently displayed, 48 megapixel camera. Same on the Redmi Note 7. The Redmi Note 7 is even worse because when people, when you buy a cell phone or when you are buying a camera, people's perception of megapixels is that more megapixels equals a higher quality photo. I'll say that again. For the majority of consumers, more megapixels is a higher quality of photo. Now, for the Xiaomi Mi 9 and the Redmi Note 7 Pro, which feature true 48 megapixel image output from the sensor, it's less of a scam. But for the regular Redmi Note 7 that uses it uses the RGB, or uses four RGB lenses, or it uses four different colored lenses to go ahead and get different color information. But ultimately, that sensor cannot put out 48 million individually colored pixels. And that's what matters, is whether or not it can put out 48 million individually colored pixels, excuse me. So you're not getting that true resolution at all on the Redmi Note 7. I understand what they're doing to use pixel binning to try to get a better signal to noise ratio. But would it be better than just doing a higher quality 12 megapixel camera? Probably not. Probably be pretty similar. Now, for the Redmi Note 7 Pro and the Mi 9 that has the Sony IMX 586, I believe is the name of it. It's a little bit different of a story. What do I mean by that? Well, those are all sensors that can do a real 48 million pixel image output. And this is important to note because they will do 48 megapixel images natively, whereas the Redmi Note 7 has to do post-processing to go ahead and give you that resolution. So they are real 48 megapixel cameras. So it's not as much of a scam as the Redmi Note 7. But I'm going to give you guys a little secret about cameras and stuff. The number of pixels does not matter at all. Okay. Now, obviously, does not matter at all. It just does not. It does up to a certain point, right? But anything more than 8 megapixels, it doesn't matter. In fact, a lower megapixel count would probably get you better and somewhat faster performance. And what do I mean by that? So what do I mean by megapixels don't matter? Well, every time we get a camera or lens manufacturer that is putting out new lenses, and the lenses get tested by third-party reviewers on the market, one of the things that normally gets talked about is the resolving power. I'll repeat that again. If you're interested in lenses and optics, when a new lens comes out, look for the resolving power. Now, what do I mean? Okay. So, Tony and Chelsea Northrup, which are a more camera-oriented set of YouTubers, posted a video on this about do megapixels matter. Or if I can find it, I'll link it down below. And if you go and check out their video, let them know that Mitchell Millennial sent you guys over there. And essentially what that's saying is that the lenses that we have for a lot of our cameras, and I'm talking about full-size professional cameras, a lot of those lenses are not able to deliver the detail that the sensor can record. Okay? Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that the optical quality of a lens, if you're shooting a 47 megapixel image with like a Nikon D850 or a Sony A7R III, the optical quality that you need to have from the glass that you're shooting, okay, needs to be so high that most people that are using cameras like that or trying to get the most sharpness and the most out of those sensors are using prime lenses, because prime lenses are going to give you better performance because they are designed specifically for one focal length, whereas a zoom lens will give you varying performance across the focal range as you zoom in and out. Why does this matter with cell phones? Cell phone sensor technology has gotten to the point now where we're able to cram so many photosites and so many pixels onto an image sensor that we are making image sensors that far exceed the capabilities of the lenses we are putting in front of them. Why does this matter? Why is this important? Why should you care? This is why. If you have a brand new Sony A7R III, one of the best full-frame cameras currently on the market. If you have a Sony A7R III and you take a vintage Canon lens from the 1970s and you put that on the Sony, let's say it's a 50 millimeter lens, and then you take a brand new Sony 50 millimeter lens and you put it on there. Even if the image is in focus, the lens from the 1970s is going to show considerably less detail, and you will have less sharpness and less overall clarity in the image. Why? Because lenses that were produced in 1970 could never handle the amount of pixels that we have today. They just cannot compete. Now, I know what some photography enthusiasts at this point will be saying about what about that doesn't matter, or is sharp. I am talking about purely the resolving power, purely the ability to capture all of the detail in the image and transmit that back to a sensor. Newer, expensive lenses just do a better job of doing that than older, expensive lenses. It's that simple. So, this is relevant to cell phones because even if Xiaomi is putting 48 megapixel Sony sensors into their cell phone cameras, you are probably not getting 48 megapixels of detail even if you're shooting in the 48 megapixel mode. Why? Because the lens cannot resolve and it cannot transmit enough detail. This is especially relevant if I were to compare any of my prime lenses to my Sony kit lens. You guys would see immediately a difference. So, why is Xiaomi advertising these 48 megapixel cell phone cameras kind of a scam? Well, people are coming to them under the assumption that they are getting, potentially at least, a colossal step forward in image quality when it is impossible for that claim to be delivered. Because we do not have lenses small enough to resolve enough detail to go ahead and give us 48 actual megapixels or 48 million pixels of detail. Now, there's other things that using such a high megapixel sensor solves. It improves signal to noise ratio, definitely for low light photos. The pixel binning can help give us more accurate colors during the daytime in some cases. The same way shooting a Sony a7R III and then downsampling that or using noise reduction on it can give you a more clear image. So in that sense, there are tangible benefits to that. But I would have rather heard something like a dual pixel, or Can uses that, or a multi. I much would have rather had Xiaomi advertise the Mi 9 with having a camera that has got the 12 megapixels or can do a 48 megapixel image or something like that. Something that's not, in my opinion, somewhat misleading to consumers. Because at the end of the day, the 48 megapixels, you're not going to see it. The lens can't resolve it. And in 12 megapixel mode, then you essentially have a 12 megapixel camera, which is great. And don't get me wrong, the Mi 9's great. Great camera. Love it. But I wanted to go ahead and explain why I think that some of this stuff is a scam, why I think some of it is misleading to consumers who are not as well versed in photography. And I wanted to inform my audience that might be under some kind of wrong assumptions. Overall, was I still happy with the Mi 9? Yeah. I was really happy with the Mi 9's camera. When you shoot it in 48 megapixel mode, you're definitely getting more detail than you do in 12 megapixel mode. For night photos, the pixel binning does provide a cleaner image. Using the 48 megapixel files and editing them afterwards was pretty nice. Using Gcam, which allowed me to save those 48 megapixels as RAW and then edit them in Lightroom, was pretty cool. But overall, I still think it's misleading. I still think that I still think that a lot of consumers might buy this under some wrong impressions, and I wanted to put my podcast out there just to cover it in a longer form for you guys. And that's going to wrap up today's podcast. Hope you guys enjoy the podcast. I'm going to be renaming it just to the Mitchell Millennial podcast, so it's easier to find me everywhere. And I'm going to be resubmitting it to the Google Play Store. I think there's a Millennial podcast in there right now. And I'm definitely still going to be on SoundCloud for you guys. If you guys do listen to the podcast, let me know what other podcasts you listen to in the comment section down below. And until next time, guys, it's been Mitchell coming to you from Hanoi. Peace.